Hey, happy, healthy women. Welcome to another Fearless Friday where we take a moment to just pause and really look at how are we showing up in our world? How are we, designing our lives so that they're beneficial both for ourselves and for those around us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Meg Heppner. I'm the branch director out here in South Surrey, British Columbia, and I am joined by the amazing trailblazer Whitney, who has just been such a light out here for shining a, shining a light that shines a light. Yeah, I guess that's how you'd say that, but shining a light on some of the things that maybe we haven't thought about in our health and in the way that we structure the habits that we have and the way that we show up. And honestly, it's been so wonderful. And I love doing these Fearless Fridays with you because even in a 20-minute conversation, I walk away and I have something to chew on for the rest of the day. I remember the one time you said something to me, and I think I thought about it for a week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, that was so powerful. I'm so glad we had that conversation. So welcome here. Why don't you introduce yourself to anyone who's watching a Fearless Friday for the first time so that they can get to know you?
Yeah, thank you. So I am Whitney. I am located in Vancouver. I grew up in Toronto and I've been in Vancouver for about 10 years now. And Meg and I were just talking about how the weather has been not so impressive for spring. But the weather was really one of the things that drew me to move across the country, the moderate climate. So I am grateful for that. And another reason for that is since the age of 13, I've had autoimmune disease. It started with Raynaud's syndrome, which basically you lose your circulation prematurely. So walking through the frozen aisle at the grocery store or going swimming in a regular temperature swimming pool, I would lose my circulation. And then around the age of 30, I received another diagnosis of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And I was already a nutritionist at the time, but I definitely dove in like with 2 feet saying, I'm going to focus all of my attention on becoming an autoimmune and chronic illness expert so that I can help other men and women heal from the root cause of autoimmune disease and so that they can live well day to day despite having chronic illness.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And like when I hear your story and I hear that you were 13 when, you really the journey began for you, it's so young, right? And it's amazing how we can spend our life dealing with these health things and we really feel like one, it's extremely overwhelming, and one, it's a lonely journey. And one of the things that I adore that you do is you make it less lonely and less difficult. And I think that that's a really, really beautiful thing. So I so appreciate what you do for this community and for all of the communities that you're a part of, and for your clients and everyone else. So here's the thing. We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. And I think it's such a fantastic topic. This idea of as you're building your business or even just your life, it doesn't even have to be a business, just your life, as you go throughout building your life or your business, things just get added to our plate, right? And sometimes it can happen really, really slowly. We volunteer for a new thing, we have a child, we, get a promotion at our job, we take on some more clients, whatever it is. And things just start to pile up. And this has for surely happened to me. All of a sudden I lose control. And it's almost like my day is controlling me. I'm not controlling my day. And my energy gets depleted. And I literally feel like that. And this is kind of the thing that comes to mind. Why is life so complicated? Why is life so complicated? And it feels like there's no way to pull it apart. And I know you were talking about, well, hold on. There's a way to simplify things. There's a way to say, actually, no matter how much I have going on, I can be the one who makes decisions about what this day is going to look like and how I'm going to handle these responsibilities. And so I'm curious a little bit about your journey as you went from, younger person to married person to person with child to person, with business, and you accumulated all these responsibilities along the way, what your journey was like.
So I'm a bit lucky in the sense that I've been a pretty naturally disciplined person since a child. I was that
All
kid.
right. Well, we're done then. Okay, good. Finished. No, I'm teasing. I'm the least disciplined person, so I'm already jealous.
So, but everything has its pros and cons. I was that kid who would be crying at home at night that my homework wasn't done perfectly and I didn't understand something. And my parents would be telling me, this is good, submit it. It doesn't matter. Like I had my parents telling me the grades don't matter, where in most households, it's like the grades matter, you know? I put a lot of pressure on myself. And all the way through university, although in university things were a lot more challenging and my grades did go down a bit. But again, it didn't matter because I landed a job straight out of university. It was a sales job. It required a lot of travel and it was work from home. So my first career was a work from home position. And the natural discipline did help me, but I definitely had to figure out how to structure my day. And in that type of job, you basically have to create your own work. It's not like you arrive to a file with pieces of paper and it's like, this is what you're doing today. It's like, here's your customer database. This is the result that I want you to produce. Go. And you need to figure out every piece of it. So that's really where it started with me. And there was, like I said, a lot of travel involved. So there was a lot of moving pieces with scheduling and fitting things in and leaving enough buffer time. So I kind of learned all of this stuff before I knew the terms for it. I was just kind of doing it. And I've had several different careers since then and now working for myself. But I am finding it more challenging working for myself because I love working, like doing the stuff that I'm doing. So the boundary part of it is a little bit more challenging. It spills over. And when it does spill over, it doesn't necessarily feel bad, at least not in the moment. But then you realize the next day that you're a little more tired or you're a little crankier with your kids. So even though it feels good in the moment, things do start to snowball a little bit. So there's that part of it. And then also as an entrepreneur, it's like, what is important? What is going to move the needle in my business? And I love that term. I use it with my clients all the time. It's like, what are the dietary changes? What are the lifestyle modifications that are actually going to move the needle on your health?
Yeah.
And I'm trying myself to apply that in business.
Yeah, I don't resonate with the self-discipline. Unfortunately, I wish I did resonate with that. As a child, I grew up in a very chaotic environment because my mom was like, she was like a puppy with a shiny object or whatever, right? She was just like, oh, here. And so I just observed that and took that on. So discipline was not something that was valued in our house. And I definitely realized that is a detriment once you become your own adult. Because my husband grew up in a very structured environment and he has a work ethic like nothing I've ever seen before. Like nothing will stop him or distract him or whatever. And I'm always like, man, I wish I was that way. So my journey was very difficult in learning how to do boundaries. Oh, sorry, you guys probably hear my puppy. He's a dog. I still think of him as my puppy, barking now. But I totally can relate to, it doesn't feel bad to overwork yourself in the moment because there's like the high of accomplishment, but then realizing, wait, I paid something. I paid a price for that feeling. And for me, as someone who, my children are a little bit older, they're 17 and 15, so they're getting to that point where they're leaving home. I'm realizing, like, as we're inching towards them leaving for university and doing that, there's things I'm missing out on if I allow myself the opportunity to get that hit of, wow, I was really productive or whatever. And so to me, having to put into place boundaries of, look, this is what it's going to look like, this is what I'm going to stick to, has become so massively important.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Boundaries. What a word, right? It's like those other like jargon terms. It's like, ooh, we know what boundaries are, but how do we actually enforce boundaries. And something that I learned last year or so is a new way of thinking about boundaries, where it's, and I think about it with my kids, because bedtime is a thing where I have to create boundaries. I don't want to spend an hour and a half trying to get you to go to sleep, right? So it's like with my daughter, we do our routine, we read 3 books, we have a conversation about her day, and then it's time to stop talking. And mommy will stay there lying down or sitting with you. But if you talk to me, I'm leaving, because it's not chat time anymore. So a boundary is like, when this happens, this is how I respond. So we take the power back. We're not enforcing a boundary on another person and saying this is a punishment that happens to you when you don't do what I want.
Yeah.
So you're taking all of that responsibility into your own hands.
I could not agree more. And I think that you just brought up such a great point, because so many times it's like you said, it's a buzzword, right? That's like, oh, set a boundary, but it's a vague thing that we don't really know what it is. And so most of us will fall into going, oh, a boundary is me controlling your behavior, right? And me saying what you can and cannot do. And that's actually not what a boundary is. You're so right. A boundary is taking your power back and going, no, if this happens, this is what I will do. We forget that the boundary is something we put on ourselves, not something we put on someone else. And I did not realize this. It took me a long time to realize this, but that the boundary is protection so that we can have what we want, not a restriction, right? Like sometimes we think of a boundary as a restriction. Well, this is the boundary that keeps us apart. And it's like, no, this is the boundary that keeps us together, right?
Yes.
Because we both respect this boundary, we can now be in relationship. But if we don't respect this boundary, we can't be in relationship, because one of us is hurting, right? Or both of us probably are hurting. I love that. And I do know that putting boundaries in place for work has been one of the ways that I can really feel empowered in my day, and I can simplify my day, because I used to do it like I would have just this never ending list that I added to. And so it was so cute, because at first my list was a page long, and then my list was a page and a half long, and then my list was 2 pages long. And it felt like there was an increased pressure to meet this, check mark everything off. And yet the bar I was trying to reach was higher and higher and higher and higher, because every time I started a project, every time I went, oh, I'm going to do this workshop, or I'm going to write this book, or I'm going to do this, it just flooded me with more things to do. So it was an anxiety inducing thing. Like every new project was anxiety inducing. And one of the best things I ever did was say, actually, here's what I want. And so here is how I will structure my time. And if I'm going to be in an interaction with someone, it will need to be in these parameters. And so I know one of the things that I set in place that sometimes has been frustrating to people is that I only check my emails once a day. I will check my emails before 11 o'clock. Anything that comes after 11 o'clock I will just not look at. And sometimes people go, but I needed you, but I needed you to do this. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. This is it. Because I cannot have an unending relationship with emails all day, because it completely takes away my control. Because the minute I look at it, I go, oh, I have to do this, or I have to do that. Or even, texting. I really put a boundary around texting, because in the beginning, when you could text people, way back in the day, when you could text people and you didn't have to wait for a phone call, it felt very freeing. Like, oh my gosh, I can get a hold of you whenever I want. That's amazing. But it very quickly fell into the ugly side of that, where I can get a hold of you whenever you want, or whenever I want. And all of a sudden I found, even for myself, clients or people who had demands on me texting me at 8 o'clock in the evening going, hey, by the way, tomorrow when we meet, can we talk about this? And now I'm thinking about work. Or, and that just became like, things became so complicated that there were times when I'm like, I just want to quit. I never get a day off. This is ridiculous. So all of that to say boundaries was very important for me.
Yeah. And I don't know why they thought it would be a good idea to add in knowing that the other person has read the message, because doesn't that just perpetuate the problem? They've looked at it and they haven't replied to me. Aren't they supposed to reply to me right away? But if it's an email and somebody reads it, it's not necessary. Like, not necessarily expected that you will reply right away, because you might have to look at your calendar. You might need to collaborate with somebody. You might need to find a resource. And so you're given a little bit more freedom in your response time. Although I know a lot of companies, it's like by end of day, you must have nothing carrying over to tomorrow. Whatever. That's the benefit of running your own business, right?
Totally.
But I just always find that a bit mind-boggling. It's like we think we're helping ourselves or helping the way things flow, but I don't necessarily want to know that you read my message and didn't reply to me right away. I'd rather just think you haven't looked at it yet, and when you do, you'll reply.
Yeah. I 100% agree, because it's such a funny thing, because something as simple as read on your text can bring up, and this is going to sound crazy, but I'm serious, can bring up triggers and traumas from your past going, they're not listening to me. I'm not important to them. They're not choosing me. They don't respect me. Like, we can make up so many crazy stories because we go, well, they read that and they knew I needed it and they didn't respond. And so instead of just going like, look, I can't make demands on people and that's okay. And, this is a boundary they have and I respect that. We immediately go into our own sort of victimizing stories. Like I so remember this happening to me, where we were planning a birthday party and I said to someone, oh my gosh, I so need you to bring balloons. Like, if you don't bring balloons, it's going to, whatever. And I saw they read it and I went, great, they're going to bring balloons. And then they came and they went, look, it just didn't fit in. And I was like, but you read it and you could have, and you drove past party. And all of a sudden I was like, see, you're not helping me. I'm doing this party alone, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like going, all of that happened because of a little word called read on my text. Yeah. And it's ridiculous. And so that can put so much pressure and anxiety on us. One of the things I know that's really something that you kind of are bringing to the community, especially this month with your workshop, is the idea of being in the position to say, look, what do I really want? And how do I simplify things so that I can get what I want? And so I'm really curious if you can talk to us a little bit about that. What it looks like, first of all, to actually be able to simplify when you feel like everything is crazy and out of control, and then actually how to figure out what's important and what's not important, and how do we still move forward while putting these boundaries in place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I liked what you said earlier about not just like knowing yourself, but knowing what your goal is or what your outcome is or what the purpose is, whatever word you want to use there. And if the activities are not in alignment with that, then let's leave them aside for now. So part of what I talk about in the workshop is knowing what your essentials are. What are the essentials in your day that are moving the needle to get you the result that you're setting out, whatever that might look like for you. The other component of it is knowing yourself. So there's a little bit of personality talk in the workshop as well, where we were like, if you're a rebel, you might need to be a little creative about how you are telling yourself to get something done. So that's another component of it. And then there is also a process, like you said, you used to have these long lists. Well, yes, the list is important to get all the ideas out, but then what can we do with that list to simplify and make sure that we're not overwhelmed and we still have time for all of the other fun things in life, or necessary things like exercise or meditation or eating a healthy meal during the day? How do we have time for that and work so that we can feel good at the end of the day and we don't have that snowball effect where the next day we're feeling a little more tired or a little more cranky and we can't quite pinpoint why that happened?
Yeah. And it's so interesting because what you just said is why I admire your work so much, because you do this every time. I notice this about you. You don't just give people strategies, right? Because sometimes I feel like we're inundated with strategies. Here, do this, do this, do this. What I like is that you dive into who are you personally, and then which one of these strategies matches with who you are personally, because I feel like that's so forgotten sometimes, especially if you go see an expert. An expert will say, look, here's a prepackaged way of doing things. Now modify your behavior and your personality so that you meet this, right? And what you're doing, which I think is so interesting, and you do it consistently, is you go, look, let's dive into who you are And then let's see, like, do we have to be creative because you're a rebel, right? Are you like Meg and grew up really undisciplined? Well, what is that going to look like while you try these strategies, right? And you really help the person make it personal, because
Yeah.
that is so important to say, who am I and how will this strategy fit? Because if someone gave me a strategy that required someone to be an extremely disciplined person and I'm just not that, that's not going to be beneficial to me. But if someone said, look, you are set up like this, and yes, you want to increase, your self-discipline, etc., but you are this kind of person. Here's how we can modify things so that you can still feel in control while you learn how to develop some discipline. And it's like, oh, that's beneficial. So I think that's incredible. And I love that you do that consistently with all of your workshops, really taking the individual into consideration.
Yeah, because I'm a firm believer, if you don't like what you're doing or you don't understand why it's important, you're not going to do it. And so with my clients, even if I recommend a supplement to them, like a fish oil, I explain to them exactly what it's doing in their body, not in like a half an hour explanation, in 30 seconds, to say, the fish oil is really reducing inflammation in your body. And did you know that the healthy gut flora also love that? And it helps with gut repair. So every time you're putting this in your body, you're helping like the integrity of your gut, which is where your immune system lies, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, okay, the fish oil is important. It's not just this like thing on my checklist.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Oh, you know what? So fascinating. And it's interesting because my husband is also a health nut. And I mean that like totally endearingly, because he just loves everything health. And I find that sometimes he will come to me with this really scientific explanation. He'll be like, this is doing this and it affects this biochemical blah blah process. And I'm
I
like,
feel like him and I would get along quite well.
I think you would. And I gaze, like, I'm just like, ooh, and I pretend to be listening and I nod my head at the right time. And then he's like, I can tell, I know what you're doing. And then the next time he'll come up to me and he'll be like, you know how you bloat after you eat meat? This will take it away. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, totally. Like, give it to me. Give me more. How many more? Because
Yeah.
it's personal and I understand. And so he's learned to tell me in very simple terms how it's going to benefit me. And then I can actually follow through. So I think that's amazing. So tell me, when is your workshop? Do you already have a date for it? And where can people just connect with you if they're going like, look, this woman is wise and amazing and wonderful, and I need to connect with her in a deeper way? How do people get a hold of you?
So everything is on my website, whitneycoupland.com. You can connect with my Instagram and my YouTube there. And my workshop called Simplify Your Workday is on Wednesday, June 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific. And I will link that. It'll be on the Happy Healthy Women Facebook and all of that, but it will also be linked in my Instagram link tree. So it's super easy to go in there and sign up.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So I recommend everyone go check it out, because I know it will be fabulous. And I know that people will walk away from it feeling so much more empowered. And that's the feeling that we all need if we're going to make change in our life. The idea that we can. And when you go to an event like yours and you go realizing like, oh my gosh, I can do this. I have the resources. I've been heard. I've been understood. Someone is giving me what I need. You can go into your life and go, I'm going to make the changes that I want to make in order to really create the life that I want. And so I encourage everyone to go. We'll also put the links in the comments. So that'll be super easy for anyone watching this. Just check that out there and you can easily find it. But honestly, thank you, Whitney, for all that you do, for creating this space for us in order for us to dive into who we are and how we can show up in a more beneficial way. It's amazing. And I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Meg.
Awesome. Thank you for listening, everyone. Have a good day. Take good care.